So today we're going to examine leading and working in teams in professional settings. Now, as a college professor, I know there's nothing that draws more sighs and moans from a class of students as when a professor says, "And now I'm going to assign a group project." I saw this meme and I thought it was pretty true of most students' experiences. When I die, I want the people I did group projects with to lower me into the grave just so they can let me down one last time. I get it. I know group projects for students are not always positive experiences, and that's because students don't pull their own weight. There are different types of students, and sometimes you wind up doing most of the work yourself, and you take on that responsibility because of the outcome. Your grade in that class may be dependent upon you being successful on that group project. And so a lot of times group members just disappear, they don't do the work, etc. Well, in professional settings, the nature of the modern workplace is one in which you cannot be a solitary colleague. You cannot be someone who decides that you want to do it all on yourself. You are going to work in teams professionally, and those experiences are going to be different than your working in teams as students because there are different outcomes tied to that. There are different responsibilities. There are different methods of punishment per se if that group experience doesn't work well professionally. There are consequences to being a bad group member at work, and those consequences aren't always present in a classroom setting. Why is this important to you? Because 75% of individuals in the professional workplace report that they always or often work in teams. So over 3/4 of working professionals indicate that they work in teams often or always. And I like this quote from the textbook that says, "Rarely do big ideas emerge any longer from the solitary labors of genius," meaning that you you have to be surrounded by other people in order to be successful now. That you rarely are you now going to be able to have that type of success on your own. Being a solo player isn't an option in today's workplace. I tell students when we talk about interviewing and we look at things like personality at work, that you can't go into an interview and say, "You know what, I really would like this job. However, is it possible for me to have a cubicle that's not near anyone else? I really don't want to work with people." That just isn't an option in today's workplace. Team players are more highly valued today than rugged individualists. Some more quotes from the textbook that I thought were pretty true. "The single combat warrior, that bright, purposeful worker, tends to suck up a lot of oxygen in an organization. And now they're often seen as too difficult." And getting good players is easy. Getting them to play together is the hard part. I think both of those quotes are applicable. When I was a sales manager at Bank of America, I was responsible for hiring new sales members of the organization there in my particular branch. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, I did not often hire the most qualified individual on paper, the person who had the most experience or the best experience. Who I hired were people who had good personalities, who were easy to get along with, because I could see those people working in my organization, working in my branch, and getting along well with the other people, the existing employees that I already had there. And so that team environment and preserving that team environment was very important to me. So I would look for people who had really good personalities, and I would hire those people before I would hire someone who just seemed a little bit combative or someone who just didn't seem like they may be the best team player. And so you see more and more of that this idea of camaraderie at work and getting along well with others is still an important attribute to have, because being a solo player is not an option for us professionally. There are some benefits to working in teams in organizational settings, and the first is that working in teams tend to produce greater productivity. That's where we have that saying, two heads are better than one. You might have heard that expression before, where it says well-conceived and efficiently operating teams, well, they produce more solutions than individuals who go at it alone. And the solutions that those teams are producing are likely to be better solutions than something that just one individual person or one solo practitioner comes up with. So they're producing better solutions, and they're more effective when they do so. Now, the accuracy of an effective team is also higher than the accuracy of isolated individuals' work. And what that means is that when you're working in teams, there are other people there who are looking at the outcome of whatever it is that you're producing. So if you're producing ideas, or maybe you're producing actual physical products, if you are the only person working in that environment, there's no one really behind you to sort of check and make sure that everything was produced accurately, the way that it should be, that it is correct. So when you're working in a team environment, there are other people there to support you, other people to catch it when maybe you make a mistake or there's an error or something needs expanding or made a little bit more clear. There are people there who support you. Therefore, the accuracy of teams are higher when you work together than if it's just you. Now, also, teams generate more commitment and enthusiasm from the members who create them. And so with people usually more committed to something, or people are normally more committed to something if they have a part in making that. So effective teams have a group of people who are working together for a common good. And as a result of that, they are more committed to the outcomes and working processes of those teams. So there's 5 characteristics of work groups or teams that I want to talk about. And work groups is defined as a small interdependent collection of people with a common identity who interact with one another, usually face to face, and over time in order to reach a goal. And so the first is size. And a work group must be at least 3 people in size. So most experts say that 2 people working in a group, 2 people working together is not considered a team group or a work group professionally, because the partners, when there's just 2 of you, you don't interact in the same way that 3 or more people would interact. So the textbook says, for instance, 2 people working together can resolve disputes by only having to persuade each other. When there are 3 or more people, well, you can't just persuade the other person in the group. It's a little bit more difficult. You have to have compromise and practice compromise. So in groups, members can form alliances and they can force pressure on the other people. That's oftentimes you'll hear people in a group say, well, we're going to go with majority rule. So if there's 5 of you in a group, if 3 of you agree on an outcome, then that majority rules. The 2 people who have a difference in opinion are outvoted or overruled in that instance. The second characteristics of work groups is shared purpose. Think, for instance, guests at a reception or attendees at a conference convention might talk with one another, but unless they share a mutual goal, they will not collectively accomplish anything. So there has to be a shared purpose or a shared goal present in order for a work group to be identified. The third characteristic is that there's interaction over time. So a group that interacts over a period of time develops particular characteristics. So for example, that group will tend to develop shared standards about what is appropriate behavior that its group members are expected to meet. Typical expectations may involve how promptly meetings begin, when meetings are held, what each member is expected to contribute, what are the tasks, what kind of humor is appropriate in the group, what are the rules, and so forth. And that is based over interactions over a period of time. So the longer you work together in a group, the more comfortable you're going to be. And therefore, the better the outcome of working in that group should be in terms of some of the characteristics that we have already talked about. The fourth is interdependence, and that's the characteristic of group words. teamwork that says group members don't just interact, they depend upon one another. So consider the workers in a restaurant. If a kitchen crew fails to prepare orders promptly or correctly, then the server's tips will decline. Now, I used to wait tables when I was in college myself, and so there was nothing worse than when the cooks messed up an order or an order was delayed in the kitchen, because I knew that those customers did not care in the slightest that I was not the one who personally created the problem with their food. But guess who was going to pay the price for that? I was. As the server, they were going to take their frustration out on me. And so there is an interdependence among group members that say we depend upon one another when we are part of a group. The last characteristic is identity. And identity discusses when we view people as both outsiders of a group and people within a group. So some groups may have a formal title. So for instance, I am on a campus diversity committee for Lone Star College at University Park. So I am a member of a group, a distinct entity that has a very specific identity. Our group is put together in order to examine issues of diversity at Lone Star College, specifically University Park, and that is the task and identity of that group. So other groups, so they may have an informal identity. You may be on a lunchtime power walkers group where you eat lunch and then you walk. My mom is part of one of those in her job. There may be other types of identities, both formal and informal, in relation to characteristics of a group. Now, there's also 7 types of power and influence of group members, of teamwork at work. And we're going to examine these 7 because they are particularly interesting. So it is important to note that group members, most teams, have a designated leader. Now, that might be a supervisor, that might be a chairperson of a committee, it might be a coach of a team, it might be a manager. But there is some designated leader who has the formal authority and the responsibility to supervise the task at hand. Now that's when in groups that have designated leaders. There are also self-directed work teams, and those are a little bit different because if you're part of a self-directed work team, well, you're responsible for managing your own behavior in order to get a task done. So maybe your boss says, you know what, you guys need to do this. This is the goal that I want you to accomplish, and I want you to work together and I want you to get it done. And then just get back to me with a solution. Your boss doesn't designate a leader and he says, I'm not going to be the leader. I'm not going to supervise you. I want you to figure it out. You come up with the time, you meet, you come up with the solutions, and you figure it out. So that is a self-directed work team versus a designated leader. So as we look at the 7 types of power and influence of group members, this is important because I want you to remember here that when you are part of a group or part of a professional team at work, you are going to run into these different types of power. And now this might be someone exhibiting these power characteristics on you, or you may be the person who has the ability to exert this power depending upon who you are and your position at work. So the first is position power. And position power is just our ability to influence other people that comes from the position that we hold. So the most common example of this is to think about your boss. Your boss at work has position power over you. Because they are your boss, you listen. There are consequences when you don't. You are fearful of not completing something that your boss asks you to do because they have position power over you. So if someone has direct ability to do something to you for failed consequences, or maybe not even failed consequences, then that person has position power over us. The second example here or type of power is going to be coercive power. And coercive power is when someone has the power or the ability to punish you because we often follow another person's example when we don't follow along and we don't reach the intended outcome, then there may be consequences. So, okay, that was a little confusing. Let's look at it this way. Coercive power is going to be the power that your boss has. So your boss has position power because of the position that they hold above you. Coercive power is your boss then turning to you and saying, you know what, it would really be a shame if you didn't get this, didn't get this done, if you weren't able to successfully do this, because that is something that I really need people who work for me to be able to do. Well, that's coercive power. That's using your position and your power as a way of coercing or convincing other people to do something. So your boss may look at you and say, you know what, if you don't follow at least some of my suggestions on this, I'm going to punish the whole team. And so they are persuading you to change a behavior, to do something, because they have the ability to persuade you based off of their position. The third and the fourth here is reward power and expert power. Now, the flip side of coercive power is reward power. So that is when you have the ability to reward someone, to give someone something in appreciation or return for someone doing something. So you're not trying to coerce people in a negative way like coercive power, but instead you're trying to reward people. So group members can give their own rewards, and this may take the form of social payoffs. It may also be increased goodwill and task-related benefits, such as voluntary assistance on the job. So that's reward power, the ability to provide something that is usually tangible. So the most obvious rewards are going to be pay raises, better working conditions. My boss, when I first got out of college, working for Citigroup, they would give us time off. They'd say, okay, the winner of this group, the most effective team member this month, based off of whatever metrics they come up with, is going to get a day's paid vacation. Well, that was worth working for me. I would work for that because that was reward power. Now, the fourth is expert power. And expert power comes from the group's recognition of a team member's expertise in a certain area. So you're working together in a group, and you're looking at a very specific problem as part of the goals of the group there. And you recognize that someone in your group has a lot of experience in that specific area. And so you defer to that person because they have expert power, or they are someone who is knowledgeable, very knowledgeable about whatever it is that you're looking at. Now, two problems can arise with this. One is maybe management doesn't recognize a knowledgeable team member. So you're working in a group, or you're working in a group at work, and your supervisor or whoever is leading the group, they don't recognize and say, you know what, Rick, I know you have a lot of experience in diversity. Why don't you lead the charge on this specific item this next week? And maybe they just don't recognize me at all, and instead they give someone else the ability to do it. And I'm thinking to myself, but wait, I'm really knowledgeable about diversity, and that's my area of expertise. Why would you let them do it, or why would you assign the task to them instead of giving me the opportunity to work on that? So that can be one problem. And the second problem is when someone portrays themselves as being an expert or qualified, but they really aren't. So maybe the group says, you know what, Rick, why don't you take the lead on this, because we think you're a really good, knowledgeable person in regards to such and such. And maybe I'm not, and I don't speak up. And now all of a sudden that can create problems because they've granted me expert power when I'm really not an expert. And the last two here are actually, there's three more, but the referent power and information power are going to be our next two. And the referent power refers to the influence that a member may possess due to the ways that other people in the group feel about them. Now, this is interesting because referent power, we think of the word respect. What does it mean for you to respect someone at work? That could mean a whole host of things. Maybe that's someone who is just always really nice to you. Maybe it's the guy in the cubicle who's always smiling and friendly with you and asks you how your day was or how your weekend was, and who takes a personal interest in being a good colleague of yours. That might be referent power. It could also be based out of attraction or just the fact that we like somebody. So referent power, oftentimes we think of respect, but there are different reasons that we respect someone. But referent power is giving certain members of a team more power because we like them or we respect them. Information power is a lot like expert power. And information power, though, is the ability of some members to influence a group because of the information that they possess. Now, it's important to note that the information is different from expert power. And that's because if you think about an expert possessing some form of talent, we generally think of that based off of training or education. So I am an expert. I would be considered an expert power of communication because I have 3 degrees in communication. I have a Bachelor of Communication, a Master's of Arts in Communication, and a PhD in Communication. So I have expert subject knowledge that is based off of education and training. I've been teaching communication for a long time now, almost a decade of my life. And so that's expert power. Now, information is different from that because that's just saying, you know what, someone is very knowledgeable at something. Can you be knowledgeable about communication and not have a degree? Of course you can. Can you be knowledgeable in certain areas without actually having a degree or on-the-job training that? Absolutely you can. So that is information power. That just says that someone, a group member, has knowledge of a specific thing, and therefore they have information power. Now, information power, we'll say, is the foundation for expert power. So if you have information power, it is likely over time with training and education, you're likely to develop that into more of a expert power instead of information power. And the last type of power here that you're going to see in groups at work is going to be connection power. And connection power is an interesting one because this says that as we are part of a team, that other people in that team may have influence over us simply based off of the connections that he or she has with important people. And that could be important people within the group that we're on, or it could be important people outside of the group. So maybe your boss is really good friends with your friend Karen. And he says, okay, well, now I'm going to put the 10 of you in a group together. And I'm going to try to impress Karen because I know that Karen is really close to the boss and her opinion matters. And I really want that promotion and raise. And I would love for her to put in some good words for me. I would love for her to go to my boss and say, you know what, Rick is a really good employee in the following ways. And so that would be a connection power. Somebody has a little bit of influence within the group. You also see this sometimes also when you're working with in a situation where the classic example that the textbook uses of connection power is when the boss's son or daughter works with you or works in the same job. And while the boss may say things like, you know what, just treat my kid like any other employee. Well, are you really going to treat them just like any other employee? That's the boss's son or daughter. Of course you're not, even if it's subconscious. And that is the definition of connection power, that networking and influencing does have a role in how we function within groups. So teams are also governed by 3 roles, and I find this particularly interesting because they are functional roles that team members have within groups. We define them as task roles, relational roles, and dysfunctional roles. And the first is task roles. And the very first item of task roles is, again, think of this as within a group, you will play one of these or multiple roles within a group. And you cannot take on all of these roles, but different group members will have different roles that they play within a group. And the first is information or opinion giver. And these people in a group are going to be those who offer facts and opinions that are relevant to the teamwork. The second is going to be the starter or the energizer. And these people are going to be those who initiate and encourages task-related behavior. So maybe in a group meeting, you're sitting around and everyone's talking about the weekend that you had. And you're the starter or the energizer. And you say, all right, guys, well, we better really get going on this. We've got a deadline to meet, so we need to get started. The third is a direction giver, and this person is going to be someone who provides instructions and clarity. So they may say things like, I think the instructions, what the boss is looking for is the following. So there's a direction giver. A summarizer is someone who reviews what has been said and they identify common themes or progress. So this might be someone, and sometimes groups have someone designated with team meetings that they take notes, and they say, okay, well, Rick, you're going to take notes today, or you're going to record the minutes. So it might be my formal or informal role to review and keep track of what other people have said, and then to identify common themes or progress as a result. You may also be the diagnoser, and this is someone who observes or offers observations about task-related behavior of the team. So you may say, well, we really seem to be spending a lot of time on the following. And so you are making observations and giving that information to the group. There's also gatekeepers. And gatekeepers are individuals who they regulate the participation of other members. And this is important because this is going to be the person who says, you know what? No, we all of us have to be in attendance at the meetings. All of us have to do. Or maybe they say, okay, well, 3 of us need to do the following, and then the rest of us need to do X, Y, Z. So those are the gatekeepers. They sort of monitor, almost like a supervisory role within the group. And then we have reality testers. And reality testers are important because those are people in the group who speak up and say, you know what? That's a really good idea that you have, but I don't really think that's feasible based off of our timeline or based off of our budget, etc. So you're the reality testers. You're the ones that, you know what? Great idea, but maybe not feasible today. And those are all task roles that you or others may have within a group. The second type of role is relational roles. And in relational roles, we have participation encouragers. And these are people who encourages those quiet people within the group to speak. And we let them know that their opinions are valued and that their contributions will be well received. And so sometimes people are quiet and maybe they don't speak up on their own. And you may have someone in the group say, okay, Stacy, what do you think on this? What's your ideas? And so in asking and doing that, you are encouraging participation from all group members. We also have harmonizers, and harmonizers are people within the group who they resolve conflict. And so sometimes when you get group members and they're going at it, they're just butting heads with each other. They're unwilling to compromise or reach a solution. Someone else in the group is actually the person who steps in and resolves that conflict. They are the harmonizer. We also have tension relievers, and these are people who use humor or other devices to release frustrations, members' frustrations and anxieties. And so I like to think of myself as a funny person. I was always the class clown. I like to make people laugh. And so I'm a tension reliever. I am the person that if it's really, if a meeting or something is really stressful and I can sense the anxiety, I like to make people laugh and break that frustration, anxiety up. We also have the relational role of evaluator of emotional climate, and these are people who offer observations about relationships among group members. I think, for example, I think we're all feeling a little bit defensive right now. Or maybe they say, well, Bill, what I hear you voicing frustration with is your perception that people don't trust your judgment. So these are people who evaluate the overall emotional climate. We also have praise givers, and praise givers are important because these are people who reinforce accomplishments and tell people, hey, I really value the work that you're doing. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. When we hear praise, guess what? We're more likely to continue to want to continue the same type of behavior. So praise givers are important. And the last relational role is empathic listener. And these are people who listen without evaluation to personal concerns of members. So maybe you're the person, you're just a really good listener, and several people of the team come to you to voice their concerns. Well, I'm really concerned about our deadline, or I'm really concerned that not everybody within the group is pulling their own weight, etc. So maybe you're the empathic listener. And the third type of role is dysfunctional roles. We're going to call this guy, let's say Kevin. He looks like a Kevin to me. So Kevin has a dysfunctional role as a team member. He is just someone, maybe he's a blocker. He's someone who prevents progress because he's always raising objections. He's the person who's just always saying, no, I object. I really don't think that we should do this, or I really don't think that that's a good idea. Maybe Kevin is an attacker, and as an attacker, that is someone who aggressively questions other people's competence or motives. So maybe Kevin says in a meeting, why is Rick qualified to lead the discussion on XYZ? That would be viewed as an attacker mentality. These are some interesting ones, and this is recognition seeking, and this is repeatedly and unnecessarily calling attention to oneself by relating irrelevant experiences, boasting, and are seeking sympathy. So this is making it all about you. No one likes to work with people who only care about themselves, and that is a recognition seeker. A joker is someone who uses humor, but they use humor too much. They use it excessively, and that can result in the distraction of team members or keep people from being productive in the team. And lastly is the withdrawer, and this is someone who refuses to take a stand or maybe even participate at all. Maybe they cover up their feelings and they don't respond to other people's comments within the team or even request. These are people who just withdraw from the overall experience. Now you'll see here as we conclude today's lecture some different variables that are attributed with productivity from teams. And these are some things that you can do that will ensure that you always are successful within the team environment professionally. And the first you'll see here is just, you can read these, but that members are clear and they agree with team goals. You should always set goals, regardless if that is a self-directed team or if it is a team that's been put together by a supervisor or boss. Very first thing you should do is sit down with the team members and say, what are our goals? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And if you do that, and only if you do that, can you hold yourself and others within the team accountable for those team goals. If you don't know what you're working towards, guess what? You're probably not going to accomplish anything. The second thing here is that tasks are appropriate for teams versus individual solutions. The textbook talks about there's a few different ways or a few different things that identify whether or not something should be done on a team-based approach or as a group approach. And for individual work, if something can be done with limited knowledge and information, well, you can do that as an individual and not as a team. If something is a simple task, it doesn't require a lot of people, it may also be better suited for an individual versus a team. If there's limited time available or members don't really care about the outcome, then it also may be something that is better suited for individuals. But if a task requires a broad range of knowledge and our talents, then the more people you have, the better. So a team is going to be superior to an individual if it requires a lot of knowledge or experience. If a task is complicated, it is also probably better suited for a team because you're going to have the experiences and the know-how of team members that is going to be allow you to be more successful. If there is time available for deliberation, you may also be more likely to be successful as a team. And if members are motivated to succeed or they have higher standards of performance, then a team environment may also be better. So you can go through and you can look at some of these other roles here that are going to be important in order for you to be successful as part of a team member. But in my own professional opinion, I can tell you this. Some of the things that I valued working professionally with people in teams was boils down to this last slide, and that is be a colleague, not a coworker. Anybody can be a coworker. Coworker is a title that you earn the minute you get a job. You will be a co-worker because you are going to be someone who does the same type of job or works at the same place as other people. So unless you own and operate your own small business and you are the only person in the business, you're going to have co-workers. But being a co-worker isn't enough. In my professional opinion, the people that I valued most, the relationships that I valued most, the jobs that I was most successful in, I had good colleagues, not co-workers. I had good colleagues. And what makes a good colleague? We think back to our conversations on professionalism. There's some things that tie in here. One is, do you do your job? Do you show up on time? Are you there? Are you present? That's the start. And when you're there, are you friendly? Are you fun to be around? Do you engage with other people? That's the second thing. And the third thing, the thing that I really valued most professionally was, are you supportive? Do you ask your colleagues, how can I support you? How can I help you? Rick, I see that you're really busy on this project that you've been working on. What can I do to support you? What can I do to help? Supportive colleagues earn our respect. Now, the really cool thing about that is if you are a supportive colleague to other people, if you're present, if you're engaged, if you're nice to other people, if you help them, they will be there and support and help you when the day comes, as I guarantee you it will, that you also need help. So it's this reciprocity relationship. If you're a good colleague, people will be a good colleague in return and they will support you. And in my opinion, when it comes to working on teams, that's the best thing that you can do is have a colleague mentality. Always look and say, what can I do to make this team better? What can I do to help my colleagues? And my final advice for you is to, while you should do things for the desire of being successful, you want to be successful at what you do. Don't lead with that. Don't only do something if you think you're going to get recognition, because a lot of times you won't. Maybe your team gets recognition. Maybe someone else actually steals your recognition. That can hurt our feelings and really affect our mentality on a team. But I promise you, if you're a good colleague, if you're a good team player, team member, and you're successful, that's going to come back to you. It will. I've seen it happen in my own life. I've seen it happen in the lives of countless friends. Don't always do something solely for the recognition. Be a good colleague. It'll come back to you. As I mentioned, unfortunately, you're going to have to work in teams. That's just a fact of life. So hopefully having a better understanding of how teams work and some of the things you can do to be an effective team member will help you moving forward. That's it. Have a good day.